The camera was rolling, the smile was steady, and everything looked painfully normal. A young woman casually documenting her life, talking about games, work shifts, even the quiet excitement of motherhood. To anyone watching, it felt ordinary, almost comforting. But behind that screen, something far darker was quietly taking shape. The kind of truth that doesn't just shock you, it unsettles you long after you've heard it. Because sometimes, the most disturbing stories don't come from strangers. They come from people who seem completely familiar. And when that illusion breaks, what's left behind is something far more chilling than anyone expects. What started as an ordinary YouTube presence slowly turned into something far more unsettling once the truth began to surface. For nearly 3 years, Amber Sinclair built a small corner of the internet that felt casual, almost harmless. Her videos weren't high production or carefully curated. They felt raw, unfiltered, like someone simply talking to a camera to share pieces of her daily life. She spoke about video games, her favorite titles, random thoughts, even her pet snake. At times, she'd sit there trying to remember where she left off in a game, laughing it off like anyone else would. It created a sense of normalcy that made her appear relatable, approachable, safe. And then there were the more personal moments. Amber openly documented parts of her pregnancy, speaking directly to her audience as if they were close friends. She talked about timelines, due dates, the confusion of tracking weeks, and the small details that come with expecting a child. It wasn't polished influencer content. It was casual, almost messy, but that's exactly what made it feel real. She even recorded clips during work breaks, standing in her uniform, talking about upcoming videos she planned to make, gaming series, new playthroughs, ideas she was excited about. It all painted the picture of someone trying to grow, trying to build something online. From the outside, nothing about it raised immediate alarms. If anything, it blended into the endless stream of small creators trying to find their place on the internet. And when you looked beyond YouTube, the image stayed consistent. On social media, Amber and her husband Josh appeared like a typical couple. Photos showed them smiling together, spending time as a family, taking their children out to places like amusement parks. The kind of snapshots people post every day, moments designed to show happiness, stability, a life that feels put together. But that image didn't just crack, it collapsed. Because while those videos continued to exist online, Amber herself was no longer free to make them. She was sitting in a jail in St. Charles County, Missouri, facing charges that were anything but ordinary. The accusations against her weren't just serious, they were deeply disturbing. Authorities charged her with endangering the welfare of a child, creating substantial risk involving sexual conduct, and possession of child pornography, including material that allegedly involved multiple explicit files. And as shocking as that already sounds, it was only part of the story. Her husband, Josh Sinclair, was facing an even heavier list of charges. 7 separate felonies that paint a picture investigators describe as deeply disturbing. These included child molestation, statutory rape involving a minor under the age of 14, statutory sodomy, sexual exploitation of a minor, possession of explicit material involving children, and even incest. Each charge adding another layer to a case that already feels almost impossible to process. It's the kind of situation where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, you have carefully posted memories, family outings, smiling photos, casual videos about everyday life. On the other side, you have allegations that suggest something entirely different was happening behind closed doors. And that contrast is what makes cases like this so deeply unsettling, because it forces you to question how much of what we see online is real, and how much of it is just a surface hiding something else entirely. As investigators began digging deeper, the case revealed details that were so graphic and disturbing that many of them can't even be fully described in public reporting. Authorities allege that multiple explicit videos were found, each involving extremely serious and criminal acts. Even without going into specifics, the descriptions alone were enough for investigators to classify the material as deeply disturbing and criminal at the highest level. And then came the part of the case that shifted everything from disturbing to truly horrifying. According to an affidavit, Amber wasn't just accused of possessing illegal material, she was accused of knowingly allowing abuse to happen. Investigators claim she was aware of her husband's actions involving a very young child and failed to stop it or report it. In fact, statements attributed to her suggest she admitted to being present in situations where the abuse was taking place without intervening. That detail alone changes the entire narrative, because this is no longer just about hidden crimes, it's about awareness, about inaction, about decisions that investigators say allowed something unthinkable to continue. Authorities further allege that drug use played a role inside the home, with claims that substances like cocaine were present and accessible, even with children in the environment. According to statements in the investigation, this behavior wasn't isolated. It was described as ongoing over a significant period of time, and as law enforcement continued building their case, another disturbing possibility emerged, raising concerns that this situation might extend beyond a single victim. That possibility is exactly why investigators have publicly asked for anyone with information to come forward, emphasizing that there could be more victims who haven't yet been identified. At this stage, both Amber and Josh Sinkler have pleaded not guilty. Legally, that step is part of the process. It ensures their rights are preserved while the case moves through the court system. Evidence will be reviewed, attorneys will be involved, and the full scope of what happened will ultimately be determined through due process. But outside the courtroom, the reaction is already intense. Because this case taps into something deeper than just headlines. It highlights a reality people are often uncomfortable confronting, that appearances can be carefully maintained, even when something far more troubling is happening underneath. A YouTube channel filled with casual conversations, a family that looked normal in photos, a life that on the surface didn't stand out at all. And yet behind that, investigators say there was something entirely different unfolding, something hidden in plain sight. As the investigation continued, the deeper layers of this case only made it more unsettling. Because what law enforcement is now trying to understand isn't just what happened, but how long it may have been happening, and how many people could be affected. According to officials, this wasn't a situation that appeared overnight. Cases like this are often built slowly, especially when they involve digital evidence. Specialized cybercrime units spend weeks, sometimes months, tracking activity, verifying sources, and gathering enough material to justify search warrants and arrests. It's a meticulous process, one that suggests when charges are finally filed, investigators have already seen far more than what's publicly released. In this situation, authorities have pointed to digital evidence as a key part of the case. These types of investigations often begin with a tip, sometimes from larger monitoring organizations, sometimes from flagged uploads, or even undercover operations targeting the distribution of illegal material. Once a digital trail is identified, it can lead directly to devices, accounts, and ultimately, the individuals involved. And that's where things take an even darker turn. Because alongside the digital findings, the statements included in official documents suggest a pattern of behavior that raises serious concerns about ongoing risk. Investigators believe that what happened inside that home may not have been isolated, and that possibility is exactly why police are actively asking for the public's help. They've identified multiple locations where Josh Sinkler was known to spend time over the years. These include residential areas, mobile home communities, and even public spaces like a movie theater. Specifically areas that, according to investigators, could have placed him in contact with minors. That detail alone has raised alarms, not just for what it suggests about past behavior, but for what it could mean in terms of unidentified victims. Because in cases like this, one of the most difficult realities is that not every victim comes forward immediately. Some never do, and that's why public appeals become such a critical part of the investigation. Authorities aren't just building a case, they're trying to uncover the full scope of what may have happened. At the same time, there's another layer to all of this that's harder to ignore: the role of perception. Online, Amber presented herself as someone ordinary. Her content wasn't extreme, controversial, or attention-seeking in any obvious way. If anything, it felt mundane. And that's exactly what makes this case so disturbing. Because it reinforces a difficult truth. You can't always tell who someone is based on what they choose to show you. The internet allows people to construct identities, to share selected moments, to control how they're perceived. But those curated glimpses don't always reflect reality. And when cases like this surface, they force people to confront just how wide that gap can be between appearance and truth. Legally, the case is still in its early stages. Both Amber and Josh Sinkler remain in custody and have pleaded not guilty. That plea doesn't determine innocence or guilt. It simply ensures that the legal process moves forward properly. Evidence will be examined, arguments will be made, and ultimately, the court will decide the outcome based on what can be proven. But outside of that process, the impact is already being felt. Because beyond the legal charges, beyond the investigation, there's a broader conversation happening about awareness, about vigilance, and about the responsibility people have to recognize warning signs, even when they're not immediately obvious. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all. This wasn't a story about strangers lurking in the shadows. It was about people who appeared normal, familiar, even relatable. The kind of people no one looks twice at, until suddenly, everyone does. If this case made you stop and think, make sure you like the video and share it, so more people become aware of how situations like this can unfold. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more real, in-depth breakdowns of cases that often go far beyond the headlines. I also want to hear your thoughts. Do you think cases like this are becoming more common? Or are we just seeing more of them because of digital evidence and awareness? Drop your perspective in the comments below.